Tonight we look at the gritty side of childhood, the uncertain and not so glorious part. You might imagine rosy cheeks and rest in bed. The reality for ages was a dark room gamble. Truth is many of us would not have survived our childhood. So before you settle in, take a moment, like the video and subscribe if you enjoy this. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you. It's fascinating to see who joins from around the world. Now dim the lights and join tonight's journey. Our story does not start with a child's fever or a faint rash behind the ears. It does not begin in a nursery or a schoolyard. It does not even start with a person. It begins much earlier in deep viral time, with a different animal and a different sickness. It begins with cattle. Imagine huge, slow-moving herds of ewe or ox, the hairy, strong ancestors of our cows, wandering the vast grasslands of Eurasia. Inside their blood a morbillial virus did its work. A terrible pathogen later, called rinderpest, the cattle plague. For thousands of years virus and host lived in grim balance. Rinderpest was terrifyingly efficient, a ghost that could wipe out a herd. But it was a disease of the plains and the wild. It belonged to the world of beasts. That changed around 10,000 years ago. A huge shift in how humans lived. We call it the Neolithic Revolution. It sounds grand, but it was slow and muddy. We stopped chasing food and started growing it. We cleared forests and planted seed. Crucially, we brought animals in from the wild. We built fences and enclosures. We tamed goats, sheep and pigs, and we domesticated the ewe, breeding them into the gentle creatures we know. We began to live right beside them. We shared their water. We breathed the dust of their pens. We slept near their warmth. We brought them into our world circle, and by doing that we invited their diseases too. For a virus, this was a huge chance. Viruses are not evil, they just seek new places. Jumping from one species to another is hard. The virus must latch onto new host cells. It must hijack their machinery and copy itself. For ages the rinderpest virus likely tried and failed. A herd might breathe in droplets from a sick cow. He might fall ill with a strange dead end fever. His body was a biological cul-de-sac. The virus got in, but could not get out to spread. It was a failed test. But evolution is a numbers game. Trial and error over immense time. Humanity was about to change the odds. The farming revolution gave us tamed animals. It also gave us extra food. Extra food allowed something new: the city. In the Fertile Crescent, along Tigris and Euphrates, settlements like Iraq began to swell. For the first time, tens of thousands lived together in dense permanent communities. Walled cities of mud brick homes, crowded markets and basic sanitation. They were a paradise for germs. A sea of warm bodies breathing the same air, drinking from the same wells. Sometime around the 5th century BC, perhaps in a bustling Mesopotamian city, the experiment finally worked. A strain of the rinderpest virus mutated. A tiny random change in its genetic code, perhaps in a surface protein, let it not only infect a human, but copy itself wildly in human lungs and throat. So prolifically, it burst out in a cough or sneeze, a cloud of viral particles ready for the next host. This was the birth of measles. The molecular clock method points to this period, when human civilization reached a critical mass. This new human virus had specific needs. It is a creature of crowds. To survive, measles needs a constant supply of new hosts. Once a person recovers, they have lifelong immunity. They are out of the pool of victims. So in a small tribe of a few hundred, a measles outbreak would burn through fast. It would infect nearly everyone. Survivors would be immune. The virus would run out of fuel and vanish. They could only return if brought from outside. For measles to become endemic, a permanent feature of human life, it needs a population large enough to guarantee a steady supply of new hosts. That supply comes from babies. It needs a city or network of cities with at least 250,000 to 500,000 people. A birth rate high enough to refresh non-immune children. So as the great ancient cities grew, Babylon then, Athens then Rome. The measles virus settled in for the long term. It found its niche not in grasslands, but in crowded nurseries and alleyways. It became a childhood disease, a rite of passage. It became a seasonal hunter, stalking winter months, when people crowded indoors. It was a tax on life, paid mostly by the young. For an ancient Roman, a childhood without measles would seem as strange as a world without seasons. The virus wove itself into the fabric of life. Each year a new group of infants was born. Every few years an epidemic wave swept through, taking a terrible portion of them. Survivors carried memory in their immune systems. The cycle continued. For centuries this rhythm was simply fact. The Red Plague, as it was sometimes called, was a familiar shadow but unaimless one, often confused with its more terrifying cousin, the one that left survivors scarred and disfigured. It was just one of the fevers, one of the rashes. It would take a brilliant mind and a city of learning to step into the chaos and observe with a clear eye, to give this ancient ghost its own distinct identity. We move forward in time now, from the smoky origins in antiquity to the bright intellectual world of the 9th century. We find ourselves in Baghdad, the glittering circular heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. This is not the Baghdad of modern headlines, but a city of 1 million souls, the largest on earth. A metropolis of libraries, observatories and hospitals. A place where scholars translated Greek medical works into Arabic, debating and expanding ancient knowledge. Here the pursuit of learning was a revered art. At its peak was a physician of astonishing genius, Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, known to the medieval Latin West as Arhazes. Arhazes was a polymath, a philosopher, an alchemist, and above all a clinician of the highest order. He was chief physician of the great Bimaristan, the central hospital of Baghdad, a sophisticated place with specialized wards and a commitment to rational evidence-based care. He believed in what he could see, touch and record. He rejected superstition and blind faith in authority. His guiding principle was observation. He spent hours at patient bedsides, noting every detail with a scientist's precision and a poet's descriptive power. In the fever wards of Baghdad, Arhazes faced a puzzle that had vexed doctors for centuries. The chaotic jumble of eruptive fevers. In his time, any disease with a rash was lumped together under a general diagnosis, a confusion that hindered understanding and treatment. The most feared of these was smallpox al-Yard-Ari, but Arhazes in his careful daily rounds noticed something. He saw that not all rashes were the same. Some patients, especially children, had a different illness. It was severe, yes, but it followed a different path. He decided to document it, to create a guide separating one from the other. The result was a medical masterwork, a slim but monumentally important volume titled Kitab al-Yard-Ari wal al-Hizbah, the book on smallpox and measles. For the first time in medical history, measles al-Hizbah was formally and scientifically differentiated from smallpox. It was no longer a variant or a milder form. It was its own disease with its own character, its own signs and its own prognosis. This was not a lucky guess. It was the product of methodical clinical investigation. Reading Arhazes' descriptions today is startling. His clarity bridges the 11 centuries between us. He describes the initial phase with accuracy any modern medical student would recognize. He notes the uneasiness, nausea and anxiety, the heaviness of the whole body. He describes the high fever, inflamed eyes, back pain. He was first to document intense respiratory symptoms, the hoarse voice, stuffed nostrils and dry cough. He understood this was not just a skin disease. It was a systemic illness starting deep within. Then he describes the rash itself. He meticulously contrasts measles with smallpox. Smallpox pustules, he explains, are deep and individual. They erupt over several days, forming hard scars. That made the disease so terrifying. The measles rash, he observes, is different. It appears like small pimples very close together, merging all at once, making skin flushed and red, as if it were a violent universal blush. He noted its progression. typically first on the face and behind ears, then spreading down to cover the whole body. He even documented the fine bran-like peeling as the patient recovered. Beyond physical signs or hazes provided a framework, grounded in the humoral theory of his time, but driven by his own observations. He believed illness was a fermentation of the blood, a natural if dangerous process of maturation, most common in childhood. He saw the rash not as the disease itself, but as the body's attempt to expel morbid matter. While the mechanism was wrong, the instinct was brilliant. It recognized measles as a predictable process, irony with a beginning, middle, and end. He gave physicians a roadmap. His treatise outlined therapeutic strategies, careful management of fever, rest, hydration, soothing remedies for cough and sore eyes. He advised when to let blood if necessary, and how to spot pneumonia, the most dangerous outcome. The importance of this work cannot be overstated. By giving measles an aim and clear definition, Hayes transformed it from mystery to known quantity. His book was translated into Latin and other languages, becoming a standard medical text in Europe. For 1,000 years, for centuries, doctors from Isfahan to Paris to London would see the telltale rash on a child's face and see it through the eyes of Hayes. He provided the essential first step, clear and accurate identification. He built the clinical foundation for all later understanding of measles. He separated the shadow from its twin. With that act of intellectual courage, he dragged measles out of folklore into the clear light of medical science. The disease was now known, but its ancient patterns of spread were about to be violently disrupted as humanity entered an age of global connection, an age that would take this childhood disease and turn it into an apocalyptic force in the New World. For millennia, measles lived in Eurasia and Africa. It traveled at walking speed or by coastal ship. It moved along the Silk Road, a hidden passenger, in caravans carrying silk and spices. It rode with Roman legions and Mongol hordes. It spread with slow seeping into new populations, over centuries allowing a painful coexistence. But the world was about to shrink. The late 15th century saw a new era of exploration. European powers with deep-hull ships and navigational tools, with an insatiable appetite for trade, conquest, and conversion. These voyages stitched continents together, creating pathways for goods, ideas, and microbes. This was the Columbian Exchange, the vast unintentional transfer of plant, animals, cultures, and most devastatingly diseases. Between the Old World and the New, the peoples of the Americas, Pacific Islands, and Australia had lived in biological isolation for at least 15,000 years. Their civilizations had risen and fallen. Their empires had clashed, but they had no exposure to the deadly menagerie of pathogens evolved in crowded, animal-filled Eurasia. They had no smallpox, no influenza, and no typhus and no measles. Their immune systems were, in stark epidemiological language, verge in soil. They were immunologically naive. When the first European ships dropped anchor, they unleashed biological weapons, far more potent than any cannon or musket. The first blow was typically smallpox. The great pandemic of 1520 shattered the Aztec Empire, killing a huge part of Tenochtitlan, including the emperor, paving the way for Spanish conquest. But smallpox was only the vanguard. Measles was often part of the second or third wave. In some ways it was even more insidious. Smallpox was a terrifying killer of all ages, but measles and verge and populations behaved differently. It was not a childhood disease, because there was no reservoir of immune adults. Everyone was a child in the eyes of the virus. It swept through communities, striking everyone at once. The farmer in the field, the mother, the hunter, the priest, the chief. Imagine a village in 16th century Peru highlands. A rumor arrives of a new sickness from the coast. A fever with a red rash. A sick trader brings it with him. Within a week the first cases appear. Within 2 weeks the whole village is prostrate. Fever is high cough, relentless light agony to inflamed eyes. But the true catastrophe is logistical. No one to fetch water, tend fires, or prepare food. Crops rot in the fields. Infants whose mothers are too sick to nurse die first. Then the elderly, then the adults. Not always from the virus itself, but from dehydration, starvation, or secondary bacterial pneumonia raging unchecked. A healthy community can absorb sickness in its children, but a community where everyone is struck at once ceases to function. It collapses. This scenario repeated thousands of times across the Americas. After the Spanish conquest, a series of catastrophic epidemics. Measles played a leading role. The demographic collapse was beyond comprehension. Conservative estimates suggest the population of the Americas fell by as much as 90% in the century after Columbus. This was not merely a tragedy. It was a strategic factor in European colonial project. The great empires of Aztecs and Incas, already reeling from smallpox, were further hollowed out by waves of measles and other diseases. They created a power vacuum, broke lines of political succession, shattered social structures, induced a profound spiritual crisis. The gods seemed to have abandoned them, while the invaders, often immune from childhood exposure, walked unscathed through dying villages, appearing protected by a more powerful deity. Disease did not just aid conquest. It was in many ways the primary tool of conquest. The pattern was not confined to the Americas. As European exploration pushed into the vast Pacific, the same tragic story unfolded on a smaller, more intimate scale. Islands isolated for 1,000 years were suddenly connected to the global microbial network. Let us travel to Fiji in 1875. The islands recently ceded to the British Empire. Fijian chief Ratasarowipina Sekak Obayan, along with his 2 sons, was invited to visit Sydney, Australia, as a guest of the colonial governor, a diplomatic trip, a symbol of a new era. While in Sydney, which was experiencing a measles outbreak, the chief and his sons caught the virus. They were ill but recovered. Unaware they carried a deadly stowaway. They returned to Fiji aboard the HMS Ido. Great celebratory gatherings were held upon arrival. Chiefs from across the archipelago came to welcome their leader, to feast and to talk. It was the perfect transmission event. In close quarters, the virus spread with silent efficiency. In respiratory droplets of the convalescing royal party, visiting chiefs then carried it home to every corner of the islands. The result was an apocalypse. Within 4 months, the 1875 Fiji measles epidemic killed more than 40,000 people, a full third of the entire Fijian population. Entire villages were wiped out. So many died so quickly, no one was left to perform burial rites. The living were too sick to care for the dying. Taro fields were abandoned, overgrown with weeds. A terrible silence fell over the islands, broken only by the sound of mourning. An eyewitness, Reverend Frederick Langham, wrote of the sick, the dying, and the dead, all in the same hut. It was a demographic, social, and cultural catastrophe, from which Fiji would take generations to recover. These verge and soil epidemics reveal the true nature of measles. In its endemic state, in crowded old world cities, it was a predator that farmed its prey, taking a reliable tithe from each new generation of children, but unleashed on a completely susceptible population. Its ferocity was absolute. It showed how deeply intertwined human history is with the story of our diseases. The lines on the map, the rise and fall of empires, the balance of global power, all shaped not just by armies and economics, but by the microscopic workings of a virus that jumped from cattle millennia ago, a virus that traveled the world in the breath of explorers and remade it in its own image. Before the needle, before the cool swab of alcohol, before the quiet miracle of a vaccine, measles was not a choice or a debate. It was a certainty, a shadow that fell across every cradle, a debt childhood was expected to pay. In the sprawling industrial cities of the 20th century, from Brooklyn brownstones to Manchester terraces, the virus was an architect of the family calendar, a seasonal monarch arriving with autumn's closing window, holding court until the fresh air of spring. For a mother in 1950, the question was not if, but when her child would get measles. The pathogen was so contagious, so woven into human life, that by age 15 over 90% of the population had been infected. It was a universal experience, a shared fever dream. This ubiquity bred a strange, dangerous familiarity, a weary resignation. Measles became a rite of passage, a phrase that sounds almost charming until inspected closely. It was a rite involving a week or two of misery, a hacking cough that seemed to tear at the lung, eyes so inflamed and light-sensitive they had to be shielded in darkened rooms, a fever climbing to 104 or 105 degrees, turning a child's mind into an landscape of delirious phantoms. Then came the sign, the rash. It began as always as fine faint spots behind ears and forehead, then marching inexorably downwards, a relentless red tide consuming face, also limbs, until the child was a single blotchy testament to the virus-cessed otal occupation. Inside the mouth, on the soft tissue of cheeks, tiny white flecks would appear like grains of salt unread. These were oblique spots, the unique calling card of measles virus, a diagnostic certainty for any doctor who knew to look. For most, this grim passage ended with slow recovery. Fever would break, rash would fade, the child left with life, long immunity. This predictable outcome led to bizarre folk medicine, a desperate public health calculus in living room, the measles party. The logic was grimly pragmatic. Since the disease was inevitable and perceived milder in younger children, parents would intentionally expose healthy kids to an infected one. It was a roll of the dice, a deliberate invitation to the wolf, hoping for a less hungry one. Get it over with, control the uncontrollable. A strategy born of utter helplessness, a flimsy shield against a biological certainty, but familiarity masked a predator of profound capabilities. Measles was not a simple childhood illness. It was a systemic invasion. Its true danger lay not in rash or fever, but in complications, the brutal aftershocks following the initial quake. The virus was a master of suppression. As it replicated, it waged silent war on the immune system, specifically targeting the very cells meant to protect the body. It induced temporary, but profound, amnesia in the immune system's memory cells, erasing hard-won knowledge of past infections. A child who survived measles was for a time immunologically naive again, vulnerable to every other pathogen in the environment. This opened the door to secondary invaders. The most common was pneumonia, the harsh, dry cough of initial infection, transformed into a wet, rattling struggle for breath. As bacteria seized chance to colonize damaged lung tissue in the pre-antibiotic era, this was often a death sentence. Even in the 1950s, with penicillin available, it was severe and life-threatening, filling children's wards of every major hospital. And any year before the vaccine, measles caused tens of thousands of hospitalizations. And there were the ears. Otitis media, a middle ear infection, was a constant companion to measles, occurring in as many as 1 in 10 cases. Bacteria marched up the eustachian tube into inflamed space behind the eardrum, resulting in excruciating pain, and if left unchecked, permanent hearing loss. Thousands of children every year left partially or completely deaf by a disease society dismissed as a simple rite of passage. The virus could also attack eyes directly. Conjunctivitis was miserable, but secondary bacterial infection could lead to keratitis, ulceration of the cornea, in places with poor nutrition, especially vitamin A deficiency. This could progress rapidly to scarring and permanent blindness. Globally, measles was a leading cause of childhood blindness, stealing light from hundreds of thousands of children. But the most feared complication, haunting nightmares of parents and pediatricians alike, was encephalitis. In about 1 in every 1,000 cases, the virus crossed the blood-brain barrier, launching a direct assault on the central nervous system. Post-infectious encephalomyelitis, A catastrophic inflammatory response. A child seeming to recover rash fading would suddenly develop a new spiking fever, become lethargic, then irritable, then convulse. A coma could follow. The brain would swell against the unyielding skull. Of those who developed measles encephalitis, 15% died. Of survivors, another 25 to 40% were left with permanent brain damage, consigned to a life of seizures, intellectual disability, deafness, or paralysis. In the United States, in the decade before the vaccine, measles virus killed roughly 400 to 500 people every year, mostly children. It caused permanent brain damage in 1,000 more each year. This was the true cost of the rite of passage, the price hidden in averages, the silent toll of a routine disease. Welch author Roald Dahl knew this toll intimately. In 1960, to his 7-year-old daughter Olivia contracted measles. She developed encephalitis. She died. The routine had turned lethal, as it did for hundreds of families year after year. There was one more shadow, rarer but perhaps even more terrifying. A degenerative fatal brain disorder called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, or SBE. This was not a direct complication, but a long-tail consequence. Years, even a decade, after a child seemingly recovered. A defective version of the virus hiding dormant in brain cells would reawaken, begin slow inexorable destruction of the brain. The child would experience subtle personality changes, then intellectual decline, seizures, gradual loss of motor control. It was always fatal. A time bomb planted in childhood with a fuse of unknown length. This was the baseline, the accepted reality of a world without defense. An airborne pathogen that found nearly everyone, and for a significant fraction, left behind a legacy of death, deafness, blindness, and neurological ruin. If this was its impact in times of stability and modern medicine, its behavior during societal fracture during war was another matter. It became not just a plague of children, but a strategic weapon of devastating power. The American Civil War was a conflict of many firsts. First widespread use of railroads to move troops. First clash of ironclad warships. The nation or itself apart over its founding contradictions. But it was also a massive and planned, catastrophic biological experiment. One of the most effective killers in this war. Carried no rifle and wore no uniform. It was the measles virus. When the call to arms came in 1861, hundreds of thousands of young men answered. From burgeoning northern cities, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, from agrarian southern towns. Crucially, a vast number came from isolated rural communities. Farm boys from Appalachian hollows, Illinois prairies, Mississippi backwoods. In small scattered settlements, they had lived entire lives in what epidemiologists call a verge in soil population. They had never encountered measles. The virus could not sustain itself in communities too small. They had no immunity. In a biological sense, they were as vulnerable as infants. These men were brought together by the logistics of war, packed into vast, sprawling training camps. Camp Douglas in Chicago, Camp Chase in Ohio, camps around Richmond and Washington, D.C., crowded into tents meant for a handful but housing a dozen, sharing blankets, drinking cups, and the very air they breathed. Sanitation was an afterthought. Conditions were a perfect incubator for an airborne virus. When measles was introduced, always introduced, by a single recruit from a city, it did not just spread, it detonated. Results were immediate and devastating. Entire regiments were leveled before hearing a shot fired. Official reports from army surgeons read like a litany of despair. Winter 1861, the Army of the Potomac, gathering around Washington, was ravaged. In one 3-month period, nearly 1,000 cases reported. A Confederate surgeon in North Carolina wrote, "Measles more constantly and extensively prevails than any other." He noted one regiment, the 28th North Carolina, had 500 of its 800 men sick at the same time. This was not just a medical problem. It was a strategic crisis. A general could not plan an offensive when a third of his fighting force was incapacitated, burning with fever too weak to stand, let alone march with a 60-pound pack. The virus became a force multiplier for the enemy. It thinned ranks, crippled logistics, shattered morale. Numbers are staggering. For every soldier killed on the battlefield had died of disease. Measles was a prime culprit, not always as direct cause of death, but as the great enabler. Just as in children the virus suppressed immune systems of these young soldiers, leaving them defenseless against other camp pathogens. The common cold became a killer. A bout of diarrhea could become fatal dysentery. The true executioner, however, was pneumonia. The hacking measles cough echoing through drafty tents on a cold winter night was often the prelude to a soldier's final struggle, his lungs filled with fluid. Records of a single Union Division winter, 1861, show over 2,000 cases of measles. Of these, 300 men developed pneumonia, and of those 101 died. More men killed by consequences of a single virus in one division than lost in many of the war's smaller yet more famous battles. Consider the 2nd Vermont Infantry. They arrived Washington, D.C. summer 1861. 1,000-strong healthy farm boys ready for a fight. Within months measles swept through their camp. Over the course of the war the regiment fought in nearly every major battle in the Eastern Theater, from Bull Run to Appomattox. They earned a reputation for courage and tenacity. Yet, official records tell a second, quieter story. By war's end, 153 men from 2nd Vermont killed in action or died of wounds. Another 145 died of disease. Measles and its complications were a primary driver of that grim statistic. The story was the same across the board, north and south. The 12th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry, so crippled by measles outbreak in Louisiana 1862, it was deemed unfit for duty for weeks. Confederate General John B. Gordon recalled his brigade prostrated by measles, mumps, and fever, leaving him with more sick than well men. The military medical corps, overwhelmed with limited knowledge, could do little. They established quarantine tents, the Civil War version of isolation wards, but it was often too little too late, for a virus contagious for days before rash appears. Quarantine was a futile gesture in a crowded camp. They treated symptoms as best they could, prescribing bed rest, trying to keep men warm and hydrated, offering useless concoctions of whiskey and quinine, but they were helpless against the virus itself, and had no effective weapons against bacterial pneumonia. All they could do was watch and count and sign death certificates. Cause of death: rubella, or more often febrile, or pneumonia. The secondary infection masking the primary culprit. The measles virus was a ghost in the military machine, a silent saboteur inflicting more casualties than Stonewall Jackson's flanking maneuvers or Grant's relentless advances. An enemy that could not be seen could not be fought, demonstrating with brutal clarity that gathering of armies was as much a biological event as a political one. It taught a lesson repeated in every major conflict until the 20th century. The deadliest foe on the battlefield is often microscopic. For centuries this enemy remained a phantom. Humanity could see its effects: the rash, the fever, the trail of destruction. But the agent itself was invisible, a ghost moving through families, towns, and armies, without a name or a face. Chasing down this ghost, capturing it, forcing it to reveal its secrets, would require a new kind of warfare, waged not in trenches but in sterile, quiet laboratories. A battle of patience, meticulous process, and profound insight, fought by a small army of scientists armed with microscopes, glass pipettes, and unshakable conviction that what could be understood could eventually be conquered. Early reconnaissance was tentative and halting. In the 1752, Scottish physician Francis Home, observing measles conferred lifelong immunity, attempted to inoculate people against it. Similar to early efforts against smallpox, he collected blood from an infected patient, introduced it via a small cut into a healthy person. He had some limited and very dangerous success, sometimes inducing a milder form of the disease, but the method was unreliable and risky. He was transmitting the whole untamed virus. His work was a brave shot in the dark. He lacked tools to understand what he was truly fighting. A century later, in 1846, young Danish doctor Peter Pan sent to the Faroe Islands' remote North Atlantic archipelago to investigate a devastating measles epidemic, because of Isolation Islands had not seen measles since 1781. An entire generation had grown up with no immunity. When virus reintroduced by a traveling cabinet maker, it tore through population of nearly 8,000. Over 6,000 fell ill. Pan in a brilliant feat of epidemiological detective work, went village to village, interviewing survivors, charting spread of the disease, meticulously documenting who got sick and who did not. He observed none of the elderly islanders infected in the 1781 epidemic became ill again, providing first hard scientific evidence for lifelong immunity. More importantly, tracking exact timing of virus movement from one isolated village to the next. He calculated with remarkable precision its incubation period, 14 days from exposure to appearance of the rash. He had put a clock on the ghost. He had defined its behavior, but he still could not see it. The final hunt would have to wait another century for arrival of tools of modern virology. The breakthrough came not from measles research, but from war against another great childhood crippler, polio. In 1949, a team at Boston Children's Hospital, led by brilliant, unassuming virologist John Enders, along with younger colleagues Thomas Weller and Frederick Robbins, achieved something revolutionary. For decades, scientists believed poliovirus could only be grown in nervous system tissue, a difficult and practical medium for research. Enders, Weller and Robbins proved this dogma wrong. They demonstrated virus could be grown and sustained in cultures of non-nervous tissue, human embryonic skin and muscle cells, kept alive in glass tubes filled with nutrient broth. They could watch under microscope as virus-infected cells destroyed them, a phenomenon called cytopathic effect, a staggering achievement that opened floodgates of virology, winning them the Nobel Prize in 1954. They had built a stable pen, where for first time these invisible viral beasts could be kept studied and cultivated. Stage now set for capture of measles virus. The man taking lead was a young, ambitious physician, working in Enders' lab, named Thomas Peebles. Winter 1953 to 1950 for a fierce measles outbreak swept through Boston area. Enders saw an opportunity. He dispatched Peebles to collect samples from sick children, hoping to use new tissue culture techniques to finally ensnare the measles agent. Peebles visited several locations. Most fateful stopped the Face School, a private boarding school in nearby Southborough, Massachusetts. There, amidst rows of sick boys, he found an 11-year-old named David Edmonston, boy in early stages of disease, feverish, just beginning to show telltale signs. Peebles took a throat swab and, crucially, a blood sample. Back in lab on Longwood Avenue, painstaking work began. Peebles and team took blood from David Edmonston, separated serum, introduced it to carefully prepared cultures of human kidney cells. Process was methodical, almost mundane. Glass tubes containing cells and sample placed in incubators, kept at precise body temperature. Nutrient media changed regularly. Everything kept sterile to prevent contamination. Then they waited and watched for days. Nothing happened. Kidney cells remained healthy, a flattened, remarkable layer on glass surface. Frustrating, exacting work, peering through microscope day after day, looking for a sign that was there. But then on the 9th day, people saw it change. In one tube, cells no longer lying flat, beginning to clump together, fusing membranes, forming large misshapen masses with multiple nuclei. These giants and serial cells were grotesque, dying things. A cytopathic effect, but entirely different from polio. The virus's unique signature, its footprint in cellular landscape. They had seen the ghost. To be certain they had to prove it. They took fluid from first successful culture, used it to inoculate fresh to buff healthy cells. Same bizarre clumping destruction occurred. They repeated process again and again, pass aging invisible agent from culture to culture, proving it was self-replicating. This was no chemical toxin. This was a living or lifelike entity. Final proof came when they took cultured agent, mixed it with serum from a recovered measles patient. Serum full of antibodies. When mixture added to fresh cell culture, nothing happened. Cells remained healthy. Antibodies had neutralized agent. This was the smoking gun. They had captured the measles virus. Sample taken from David Edmonston would become immortalized as the Edmonston strain, progenitor of nearly all measles vaccines that would follow. Year was 1954. John Enders and Thomas Peebles published landmark findings. After millennia of plagues, after generations of dread, after crippling armies and stealing children, the virus was finally cornered. No longer a ghost but a tangible entity in a test tube. A string of genetic code that could be grown, studied, manipulated, and most importantly weakened. The capture was complete. Scientific war against measles could now begin in earnest. The path to cornering a ghost begins not with a chase but a trap. For centuries measles had been an ethereal, untouchable force, a seasonal wind sweeping through nurseries and schoolyards. To fight it, one first had to catch it, not just in lungs of feverish child, but where it could be held, studied, and disarmed. The trap was not made of steel or wood, but of glass and nutrient-rich pinkish broth. Trap makers were not hunting measles at all. They were hunting a different monster, more terrifying in public imagination of post-war America, poliomyelitis. In a laboratory at Boston Children's Hospital, a quiet, methodical man named John Enders, with two younger, brilliant colleagues, Thomas Weller, Frederick Robbins, meticulously rewrote rules of virology. Prevailing dogma was poliovirus agent of infantile paralysis would only grow in nerve tissue, making it maddeningly difficult to study. Growing it in monkey nerve cells was expensive, ethically fraught, yielding frustratingly small amounts of virus. A scientific bottleneck, holding back progress toward a vaccine, and as a man favoring patient observation over received wisdom, possessed calm systematic skepticism, he and his team decided to try something everyone else thought waste of time. They took samples of poliovirus, introduced them not to precious nerve tissue, but to something far more common, human embryonic skin and muscle cells, kept alive in simple glass tube, placed tubes and slowly rotating drum, sloshing cells in gentle bath of nutrients and antibiotics. Eye cocktail, keeping tissue alive for weeks. Then they waited. Work slow, painstaking, almost agricultural. Opposite of dramatic breakthrough. Careful tending of a garden in a bottle. Sign of success, not sudden explosion of discovery, but subtle change in color. Nutrient broth contained a pH indicator phenol red, giving it cheerful pink hue and healthy state. But as virus multiplied, killing cells, dying cells released acid, causing broth to slowly turn from pink to somber, telltale yellow. They called it the cytopathic effect. For first time, they could see virus work without a microscope, without sacrificing a monkey. They had found a window into invisible world, a way to cultivate polio in a jar. For this seemingly simple innovation, elegant sidestepping of decade-old problem, Enders, Weller and Robbins awarded Nobel Prize in Medicine 1954. The discovery unlocked door for Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin, paving way for vaccines conquering polio. But key they forged fit more than one lock. That same year, 1950, for his Nobel Committee recognized achievement. A vicious measles outbreak or through face school, private boarding institution for boys in Southborough, Massachusetts. Young physician Thomas Peebles, then researcher in Enders' lab, saw an opportunity. Armed with Team's new technique, he drove out to school. A man on a mission. He moved through infirmary past rows of coughing, feverish boys, with flushed, blotchy faces, looking for perfect sample. Found it in 13-year-old David Edmonston. Peebles took swab from back of David's throat, carefully placed it in sterile container. Back in Boston, lab performed procedure now almost routine, thanks to polio work. Prepared culture of human kidney cells in bath of same pink nutrient broth. Introduced throat washings from young David Edmonston. Again he waited. Within few days something began happening in culture dish. Not simple cell death seen with polio. Something stranger, uniquely measles. Peebles peered through microscope, saw cells behaving bizarrely. Instead of dying off individually, they began to fuse together. Membranes dissolved, merging into vast mold, inculation monstrosities. Cold, sysmitia, looked like great sprawling amoebas. Giant cells with dozens of nuclei swimming within shared cytoplasm. The virus S calling card, unmistakable microscopic signature. This was it, they had it. The ghost haunting humanity, for millennia finally caught. Pinned to glass, slide growing obediently in Boston laboratory. Specific strain of virus, one becoming ancestor of nearly every measles vaccine to follow. Given name honoring boy who provided it. Colby Edmonston strain. Trap had been sprung. Now far more difficult work of taming beast could begin. With Edmonston strain of measles virus now living in lab freezers. A new race began, no longer a hunt, but delicate, dangerous process of domestication. Wild virus taken directly from David Edmonston was potent killer. Injecting it into person would give raging case of measles. Challenge was to create what scientists call attenuated virus. A virus weakened, humbled, taught to be gentle. Goal version still alive enough to provoke immune system, creating lifelong antibodies, but too feeble to cause serious illness. A shadow of former self-sparring partner for body's defenses. Not lethal adversary. Primary method achieving this elegant and tedious process of serial passage. Directed accelerated evolution in a bottle. John Anderson team in Boston took lead. Began taking virus, growing it in culture of human kidney cells. Once virus replicated, took tiny sample used to infect fresh batch of cells. Did this again and again and again 24 times in human kidney cells. Then shifted environment, moving virus to culture of human immune cells. Tissue from sac surrounding fetus. He passed another 24 times, with each transfer or passage virus forced to adapt to new artificial home. Tiny errors and genetic code mutations would arise. Most useless but occasional a mutation made virus slightly better at replicating in lab-grown cells. These fitter viruses would outcompute its siblings. Over dozens of generations, virus slowly changing, becoming creature of laboratory, perfectly suited to life in glass flask. Final, most crucial step, move into completely non-human environment. Took now well-traveled virus. Began pass aging through cells derived from chick embryos. Logic simple virus becoming expert at infecting chicken cells. Will in process forget how to be effective human pathogen. Lose keys to locks on human cells. Long slow process of re-education took years. After 28 passages in chick embryo cells, Ender's team believed they had done it. Created weakened strain called Edmonston B. In 1961 began testing in children. It worked. Vaccine produced powerful immune response. Protected against measles, but beast not yet fully tamed. Edmonston B vaccine still a bit hot. Significant number of children receiving it, perhaps half. Developed high fever, about third developed faint measles like rash. Far safer than wild measles, but side effects concerning enough. Doctors advised administer vaccine along with second injection. Dose of gamma globulin blood product containing antibodies from recovered measles patients. Second shot acted as break dampening vaccine reaction. Effective if clumsy, to pronged solution. In 1963, this combination became first licensed measles vaccine. In United States, monumental victory but imperfect one. While Enders meticulously worked in academic lab, others pursued different paths. Some companies like Pfizer developed killed or inactivated vaccine. Approach seemed safer on surface. Grow vast quantities of measles virus, kill it with chemical, usually formaldehyde. Dead virus particles then injected. Since not alive, zero risk replicating, causing fever or rash. Initial trials promising killed vaccine, also licensed 1963, but harbored hidden fatal flaw. Immunity produced tragically weak and short-lived. Worse, created bizarre, dangerous sensitization in body. Child receiving killed vaccine later, exposed to real wild measles. Immune system would overreact catastrophically, developing condition atypical measles syndrome, with soaring fevers, unusual rashes, severe pneumonia. Disastrous dead end cautionary tale about complexities of immune system. Safer looking path turned out far more treacherous. Final refinement, master stroke, producing global standard. For measles vaccine came from man, arguably greatest vaccine maker of 20th century, Maurice Hilleman. Hilleman, gruff, pragmatic, intensely driven scientist, working at pharmaceutical giant Merck, not tinkerer but finisher, looked at Enders and Monston. He strained, saw genius and imperfection, believed could be made better, safer, more elegant. Acquired strain from Enders group, simply kept going. Hilleman and team at Merck took it Monston B virus. Continued process of attenuation. Subjected to more passages in chick embryo cell cultures. More than 40 total. Crucially also grew virus at slightly lower temperature. Subtle stress pushing evolution in new direction. Additional forced domestication worked wonders. Sanded off remaining rough edges of virus. Result new strain, Hilleman nodding to origin. Initially called it Monston Enders strain. Eventually known as more attenuated strain, standing for more attenuated. Perfect balance, alive enough to produce robust lifelong immunity in over 95% of recipients from single shot, but so weak and so thoroughly domesticated. Side effects, fever and rash dramatically reduced. Safe enough given alone without concurrent shot of gamma globulin. Elegant one-shot solution world had been waiting for. H.I.L. Lemon's further attenuated vaccine licensed 1968. He took breakthrough, perfected it. Tools now complete after millennia of suffering. Humanity finally had a shield. Forged in quiet patient laboratories of Boston and West Point, Pennsylvania. Question: no longer whether plague could be stopped, but whether society had will to do it. By mid-1960s, weapons on table. United States had two effective licensed live virus vaccines. Enders original of Monston B strain typically given with gamma globulin. Handful other similar vaccines from competing manufacturers. Yet measles remains stubborn fact of American life. Vaccines available but not used universally. Uptake patchy, voluntary, disorganized. Each year hundreds of thousands cases still reported. Thousands children left with brain damage or deafness. Hundreds still dying. Disease rendered preventable but not yet prevented. In this environment, 1966 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) made public pronouncement of breathtaking audacity. Led by Director Dr. David Sensor Agency, announced new national goal. Not control, not reduction, but eradication. Complete elimination of indigenous measles transmission from entire United States. Aimed to do it in single year by end of 1967. To general public, even many in medical community. Goal seemed fantastical brand of American can-do hubris. Eradication any disease monumental undertaking. At times smallpox only candidate for global eradication. Still work in progress. Declare war on disease as contagious as measles. Pathogen so common, widely considered routine, unavoidable right. Seemed almost absurd, like declaring war on common cold. But Sensor and team at CDC deadly serious. had strategy multi-pronged assault combining epidemiology, mass logistics, public persuasion on scale never before seen for childhood disease. Not gentle suggestion, but full-blown public health war. First element: campaign intelligence. To defeat enemy, must first know where it is. CDC implemented comprehensive national surveillance system. Every single case measles from every doctor's office, every hospital, and every county to be reported immediately to public health authorities. Data flowed into CDC, Atlanta, creating for first time real-time map of disease. See outbreaks forming as happened. Track virus moving town to town, school to school. Shift from passive acceptance to active pursuit. Ghosts no longer allowed, move and seen. Second most critical element, offensive itself. Massive federally funded vaccination drive. Goal: rapidly raise level immunity in childhood population above critical threshold required for herd immunity. Point: virus simply runs out, new susceptible bodies. Sputters out. Not left to chance or whims of individual parents. Federal government poured millions dollars buying vaccine. Supporting state local health departments administer it. Public health grand logistical exercise. Vaccine stockpiles, refrigerated supply chains, outreach programs. Clinics held not just doctors' offices, but school gymnasiums, church basements, community centers. Sound of air, and not cough sick child, but mechanical thump of jet injector. Device: pneumatic gun using high pressure. Force vaccine through skin without needle. Marvel efficiency, small team nurses, jet injectors. Move down line, nervous children, vaccinating hundreds hour. Instrument: mass immunity, machinery designed build wall antibodies. Around entire generation. But guns data useless without public buy-in. Third front: war persuasion. CDC partners launched sweeping public information campaign. Fundamentally change way Americans thought about measles. 4 generations: cultural narrative resignation. Everyone gets it better, get over with when young. New campaign aggressively dismantled that narrative. Refrained: measles not trivial nuisance, but serious, potentially devastating disease. Posters appeared schools, post offices, showing healthy smiling children caption: they've been vaccinated against measles. Pamphlets detailed grim statistics, complications. 1,000 cases, results: encephalitis, swelling brain, leading convulsions, deafness, intellectual disability. 2,000 would die. Messaging clear, direct, unapologetic. Campaign used fear, rational fear, grounded data. Designed counteract culture complacency. Sought make vaccine not just option but urgent necessity. Clear, obvious choice, any responsible parent. Finally, campaign given legislative teeth. As federal push gained momentum, states began enacting force. Simple, powerful rule: no shots, no school. Laws passed requiring children show proof measles vaccination before enrolled elementary school. Master stroke mechanism, ensuring campaign reached not just majority children, but almost all. Transformed vaccination personal medical decision into prerequisite public education civic duty. School mandates closed gaps. Catching children forgetful, procrastinating, skeptical. 1-year goal: eradication, and 1967 proved, as many suspected. Too ambitious virus, too wily country to large. But impact campaign nothing short staggering. 1966 before eradication effort began. Nearly 500,000 reported cases measles. 1968, just 2 years later, number plummeted. Around 22,000. Dropped more 95%. Chart: CDC told story, single dramatic plunging line. Line, not abstract statistic, represented hundreds, thousands children who did not get sick. Thousands hospital beds remained empty. Hundreds lives not lost. War continued through 1970, seconds long grinding campaign mopping up. Arrival H.I.L. Lemons, improved, more attenuated vax in 1968. Final tool place. Outbreak response teams, descend any reported cluster cases. isolating sick, vaccinating all contact, building ring immunity around flare-up, starving fuel. By end next decade, measles no longer rite passage. Rarity, audacious goal while not met, impossible timeline. Succeeded, ultimate aim. Childhood plague defining generations brought knees. By unprecedented mobilization, science, logistics, political will. Quiet pediatric infectious disease wards, new unfamiliar. Deeply welcome sound victory. Great engine, public health, often powered. Not singular dramatic breakthroughs, but quiet revolutions, logistics. Creation, measles vaccine, dramatic breakthrough, flash, scientific lightning. But followed slow steady, arguably more difficult work, making miracle mundane, routine part childhood. By late 1960s, child developed world-protected measles. Also polio-diphtheria, a tetanus, whooping cough. Young immune systems, educated but calendars, parents, patients. Becoming crowded appointments. Each disease require don't shot, sometimes multiple doses. Triumph medicine becoming challenge human behavior. Into challenge walked man, personifying concept, blunt practical efficiency. Name Maurice Hillman. Hillman not man, giving grand pronouncements, poetic reflections. Farmer's son, harsh plains, Montana, carried pragmatism into laboratory murk. Famously, almost comically profane, gruff, demanding. By all accounts, single most important prolific vaccinologue ISE 20th century. Man credited developing more 40 vaccines. By conservative estimates, saving more lives than any other single scientist history. Soil-cluttered vaccination schedule, not medical problem, but simple, infuriating inefficiency. Why bring child 3 separate appointments, 3 needle sticks, when theoretically, do all once? Idea combination vaccine, holy grail, single shot, protect multiple threats. But idea fraught, immense biological complexity. Cannot simply mix 3 live weakened viruses, vile hope best. Immune system, sophisticated competitive arena. One virus provoke strong response, overshadow others, leaving child protected, one disease vulnerable to. Phenomenon, viral interference. Central problem, Hillman solve. Combination, perfectly balanced biological treaty. Carefully negotiated peace syringe. Each attenuated virus given just enough strength, trigger lasting immunity, without suppressing neighbors. Story assembled components, masterwork began as often Hillman, with own family. 1963, 5-year-old daughter, Geraldine, woke middle night. Telltale swollen glands, mumps. Hillman, ever practical scientist, did father would. Comforted daughter, drove lab, grabbed cotton swabs, drove home. Swabbed inside, throat collecting virus, making miserable. Sample taken, known child, became foundation, Geraldine strain, mumps vaccine. Version effective, safe, still gold standard worldwide today. Had second component, first measles vaccine. Building work and as peoples. Third disease, while often milder, carried unique terrible threat. Rubella, German, measles. Rubella infection, pregnant woman, led catastrophic birth, defects child. Deafness, blindness, heart problems, profound intellectual disability. Rubella pandemic, 1960 for 65 United States alone. Resulted thousands children born, congenital rubella syndrome. Hillman team Merck developed more potent, stable rubella vaccine. Now 3 pieces, measles, mumps, rubella. Work followed, masterpiece, careful, methodical science. Delicate dance, attenuation. Each virus weakened, attenuated, passing different cell cultures. Measles, mumps, components, chick embryo cells. Rubella, human diploid cells. Like training wild animal, generation become domesticated. Each passage tamed virus little more, until no longer strong cause disease. Still recognizable, teach immune system, fight real thing. Hillman team experiment, a endlessly dosage combination. Finding perfect harmonious balance, all 3 viruses coexist. Perform educational duty, without interfering one another. After years meticulous unglamorous work succeeded. 1971 measles, mumps, rubella vaccine are licensed use. Impact immediate, profound. Parents' perspective, miracle, convenience. One appointment, one shot, child protected. 3 most common. Dangerous specters. Childhood. Public health officials' logistical dream. Dramatically simplified vaccination schedules. Reduced required clinical visits. Direct result, increased immunization coverage. Easier, get parents, bring children. 1 appointment than 3-4. Compliance rate soared. A not new vaccine, new delivery system, new philosophy. Turned vaccination series, hurdles, single manageable step. Cases, 3 diseases plummeted, countries adopted it. Terrible birth defects, congenital rubella syndrome, medical rarity. Mumps-induced deafness, sterility afflicted, many vanished, pediatric records. Measles, Captain Men, death put path toward elimination, developed world. Maurice Hill, mangrove farmer's son, Montana. Not only tamed 3 ancient plagues. Package, defeat, single elegant, profoundly effective shot. Solved problem, human nature, making right choice easy choice. Profound success. MMR vaccine, North America, Europe. Cast long troubling shadow, rest world. In 20th century stark, almost cruel division emerged. Wealthy nations, measles, memory story, grandparents told. Rash few days, bed generation, parents grow never seeing. Not knowing face power. But much Africa, Asia parts, South America, measles not memory. Ever-present reality, seasonal predator. Still claiming lives. Nearly million children every year. Leading vaccine, preventable killer children planet. World possessed perfect tool, stop slaughter, safe, effective, inexpensive vaccine. Yet logistical chasm, having tool delivering seemed impossibly wide. Failure, not science but will infrastructure equity. Glaring disparity spurred one most ambitious public health undertakings. Human history. 2001 powerful coalition, global health organizations came together. Say simply enough. American Red Cross, United Nations Foundation, U.S. Centers Disease Control Prevention, UNICEF, World Health Organization. Formed then called Measles Initiative. Now Measles Rubella Initiative. Goal audacious, cut global measles deaths, half just for years. Declaration war scale, never before seen, targeting single virus. Across dozens countries, diverse cultures. Campaign waged, not armies, weapons, but cold boxes, syringes. Legions, dedicated health workers. Strategy developed, simple, elegant, 3-part model. Catch up, keep up, follow up. Recognition could not just fix future, first address present. First phase, catch up, massive sweeping frontal assault. Country after country, massive vaccination campaigns launched. Immunize every single child, wide age range. Typically 9 months, 15 years old. Regardless previous vaccination history. Designed rapidly, close immunity gap instantly eliminate. Fast reservoir, susceptible children, virus thrive. Sheer scale, campaigns difficult comprehend. Imagine arriving small remote village, rural Ethiopia. Floodplains, Bangladesh. Team health workers, oft unlocal people, trained purpose. Sets temporary post-tree schoolhouse market. Days vaccinate hundreds, sometimes thousands children. Carry cold chain series, insulated boxes, ice bags. Fraudulent broken chain refrigeration, stretching factory, Europe, India. Across oceans, continents, down bumpy dirt roads. Single vital outpost. Chain breaks, vaccines get warm, become useless. Multiply, seen tens thousands across sub-Saharan Africa. First 5 years, initiative, over 200 million children. Vaccinated, catch-up campaigns. But shock or tactic, only beginning. Second, far more difficult part, strategy, keep up. Slow and glamorous work, building permanent defense. Goal, strength and routine immunization services. Every infant born receive measles vaccine, normal part healthcare, usually around first birthday. Meant training local nurses, ensuring steady supply of vaccines, rural clinics. Establishing reliable health records, educating communities. Importance, routine shots, building lasting public health infrastructure, where none existed before. Not campaign nation, building exercise, 1 clinic, 1 vial time. Final piece, puzzle follow-up. Architects, initiative, realists, You no matter good catch-up campaigns, no matter keep-up systems, improved children inevitably miss. Family traveling during campaign village cut off floods. Clinic run supplies. Every 2-3 years follow-up campaigns conducted sweep through. Vaccinate children born since last major push missed routine dose. Three-pronged strategy created net catching vast majority big campaigns. Using smaller nimble systems catch slip through. Results stunning initial goal having measles deaths. Not just met shattered. Between 2000 to 2007 global measles deaths fell staggering 74%. Hardest hit regions Africa dropped closer 90%. Hundreds thousands children alive otherwise perished. Almost unbelievable triumph global cooperation logistical prowess. But fight far over virus always proved stubborn resourceful enemy. Retreated not oblivion world's most difficult places. Conflicts owns health workers not safely travel. Communities fractured political instability. Regions weak infrastructure cold chain fantasy. Places Afghanistan Somalia Democratic Republic Congo. Measles persisted sparking devastating outbreaks children. Already weakened, malnutrition other diseases. Final miles marathon hardest. Global initiative proven measles beat unturned million deaths year. Faction that but revealed hard truth virus does not care. National borders cease fire agreements. As long place hide long single and vaccinated community. Wait patiently chance return. Global warm easels fought grand scale story statistics millions. Logistics spanning continent story victories measured mortality graphs. Immunization coverage charts. Grand narrative however often obscured darker, more intimate. Far more terrifying truth nature measles virus itself. Vast majority children contracted illness finite miserable affair. Weak fever rash cough lucky survivors without complications. Pneumonia encephalitis full recovery lifelong immunity. Battle fought one matter days, but vanishing small exquisitely unlucky percentage survivors. Virus not truly leave merely retreated laying dormant. Safest fortress entire human body central nervous system. Wait sometimes 5 years, sometimes tense, sometimes longer biding time. Finally re-emerged not acute illness slow inexorable universally fatal. Demolition mine. Horrifying postscript, seemingly ordinary childhood disease no. Subacute sclerosing pan encephalitis SSPE. SSPE. U1 medicine's cruelest tragic conditions, not reinfection. Not simple complication, persistent slow burning infection. Caused defective measles virus managed integrate brain cells host. Virus setting clandestine residents mutated lacks ability properly. Assemble new viral particles burst cells spread body. Instead spread slowly insidiously brain cell directly neighbor. Moving neural pathways ghost. Evading immune system cannot detect enemy hiding own command center. Years child survived measles appears perfectly healthy. Go school play friends grow memory childhood sickness fades. Harmless anecdote. Then no warning decline begins onset, almost always subtle. Easily mistaken something else often begins minor personality change. Once bright cheerful child becomes withdrawn irritable apathetic. Performance school once excellent begins slip seam comes here. Tripping dropping things teacher notes difficulty concentration. Parents naturally attribute difficult phase growing up stress school. Number mundane childhood troubles. But changes not stop worsen slowly methodically. First stage just SB. Insidious intellectual, behavioral decay. Second stage horrifying nature, disease unmistakable. Child begins experience myoclonic jerks, sudden violent involuntary. Muscle spasm starts simple head, nod progresses entire body wrecked. Seizures often causing collapse warning. Defective virus continues quiet relentless march brain destroys everything. Path child loses fundamental abilities. Lose ability walk lose ability speak. Word slurring disappearing altogether lose ability feed dress self. Person work old parent knew systematically erased neuron on neuron. Cognitive function dissolves, leaving confused, unresponsive. Intellectual decline accelerates, free fall, leaving body still living. Mind effectively gone. The disease progresses. Third, fourth stages, seizures lessen. Brain damage, all-encompassing, child's body, rigid, limbs locked. Unnatural positions, descend, vegetative state, eventually coma. All while autonomic functions, heartbeat, breathing continue. Maintained lower brain stem, last part central nervous system. Consumed disease, and comes inevitably secondary complications. Pneumonia, heart failure, first subtle symptom, final breath process. Take 1-3 years, some lingered longer, slow motion. Neurological execution, most terrifying part, no treatment, no cure. Once symptoms SB begin course, absolute outcome always. Without exception, death. SSB. Rare risk estimated, somewhere 1/10,000 cases. Natural measles, some studies suggest much higher infants. Contract disease first birthday, but rarity nothing diminish horror. Amplifies SB, serves ultimate unanswerable rebuttal, dangerous myth. Measles, benign rite passage. Gauchal immunity, rash, fever, cough. Merely virus S. Opening act, true potential devastation far greater. Silent ticking time bomb, left behind handful victims. Where quiet preventative power H.I.L. Lemon's triple shot reveals true significance. Our vaccine not prevent acute illness, not prevent pneumonia. Encephalitis, deafness prevents, ensures defective virus never chance. Established deadly hidden fortress brain, every single dose administered. Not shield, weak sickness, exorcism, casting possibility decade long. Neurological nightmare, before ever begin. Greatest victories, medicine, dramatic cures, silent, invisible preventions. Tragedies never happen, slow descents, darkness averted, single routine shot. SSP or a story, modern vaccination, allowed, thankfully, never read. Work, Maurice Hillman, John Enders, given humanity miracle shield against oldest reliable childhood killers. Late 1990 seconds, comfortable developed corners, world, shield invisible. Simply part background hum, modern life, a remarkable clean water. Paved road, a vaccine protecting measles, mumps, rubella. Administered toddlers, routine certainty, first haircut. Terror, rash, darkened dreams, feverish cries, tiny grave. All receded, living memory, become ghost story, chapter, history book. Securely closed, measles, intense purposes, solved problem. Quiet vacuum, victory, fertile soil, complacency, new sickness. About take root, began not crowded, slum ward, on village. Prestigious London hospital, carefully orchestrated press conference. February 1998. 8-man son to gastronaut relates on Wakefield. Polished, confident, possessed quality, dangerous idea, irresistible. Sounded like cared, spoke conviction, lone truth, teller standing. Monolithic establishment, had story tell story, published one world. Most respected medical journals, Lancet paper, case series study, just 12. Children 12, not 12,000, even 1,200 dozen children. According Wakefield, shared unique terrifying story. Parents reported children developing normally, shortly receiving MMR vaccine. Suffered chronic bowel problems, sudden devastating regression, autism. Wakefield claimed discovered new syndrome, unique form. Autistic enterocolitis, pointed finger. Squarely measles component MMR shot. Press conference not just presented findings, gave advice, suggested. Air grave responsibility parents. Opt single dose vax. Scenes instead combined MMR. Recommendation echo. World single stone tossed placid lake. Ripples spread decades, problem stone fraud. Entire story meticulously. Constructed deception behind scenes, Wakefield's research not noble pursuit. Truth appeared, time paid more, £400,000, British lawyer Richard Barr. Barr's agenda, a not scientific, actively recruiting plaintiff lawsuit. Manufacturers Emma vaccine, Wakefield desk job, provide medical evidence. Smoking gun, make lawsuit, viable 12 children study, not random sample. Hand-picked families, already involved, legal campaign, not conflict interest. Entire point exercise only beginning rot science catastrophe. Study 12 children, no control. Group epidemiological terms barely anecdote. Cannot prove causation more noticing 12 people developed headache. Eaten toast breakfast proves toast causes headaches. Wakefield, not real-life Lindsay methodology actively falsified data. Investigative journalist Brian Deere later spent years painstakingly cross-referencing claims Lancet paper children's actual medical records. Found trail breathtaking dishonesty children developmental concerns noted. Doctors long before MMR shots presented paper previously normal. Timeline symptom onset manipulated fit. Desired narrative moving first signs. Autism closer date vaccination new bowel disease Wakefield claimed. Discovered many cases normal in test and all tissue appearance misinterpreted. Deliberately misreported pathologist Wakefield esteem worth still treatment. Children quest evidence Wakefield subjected vulnerable children battery. Invasive painful medically unnecessary procedures lumbar punctures. Colin Spokes M.R. is performed proper ethical clearance. Justified hypothesis. Paid invent profound betrayal duty physician violation sacred trust. Doctor-patient service legal strategy personal profit before Lancet paper. Published Wakefield filed patent. Tone single-shot measles vaccine. Products stand make fortune public faith combined MMR vaccine. Successfully destroyed public new none saw concerned doctor television. Dramatic headline morning paper meaty. A hungry compelling controversy. Amplified story breathless enthusiasm narrative perfect brave maverick. Faceless pharmaceutical industry fear autism complex poorly understood. Condition powerful emotional driver easier grasp simple villainous explanation. Vaccine accept bewildering uncertainties genetics neurology sober measured. Responses global scientific community drowned spoke dry language epidemiology. Large-scale study statistical significance. Explained multiple massive studies. Involving millions children already conducted found no link whatsoever. MMR vaccine autism press releases. Academic papers could compete visceral. Image crying mother doctor offering simple terrible answer like simple emotional. Truth. Complex statistical court public opinion truth never stood chance. See doubt planted modern anti-vaccination movement ghost haunting halls. Medical progress given founding myth sacred text first martyr childhood plague. Once verge forgotten quietly preparing return fallout London press conference. Not immediate low motion catastrophe contagion fear spread household. Playground cross oceans, idea released far more. Infectious virus purported exposure United Kingdom, first immediate victim. Fraud MMR vaccination rates began slide dipped safe through, bust 90%. Mid-1990 seconds perilous 80%, 2000 for some pockets. London rate fell below 60% slow collective dismantling public health. Triumph worried parent. Time each decision made love fear seem small purse in a aggregate tearing. Taping holes invisible, shield herd immunity beautiful fragile. Concepts public health, silent communal promise high enough percentage. Population vaccinated creates firewall protects, everyone especially vulnerable. Shields newborn infant young first dose MMR shields chemotherapy patient. Immune system burned away shields elderly organ transplant recipient. Kept safe phone immunity community surrounds firewall strong. Weak point vaccination rates fall embers all disease jump gaps measles. Ferocious infectivity fire needs smallest opening become inferno first major. Blaze ignited Dublin Ireland year 2000 fueled Wakefield scare immunization. Rate stumbled result devastating measles. Outbreak more 1500 cases over. 100 hospitalizations complications. Severe pneumonia tragically deaths 3. Children start brutal reminder disease actually stripped theory debate. Benign rash killer United Kingdom soon followed officially eliminating endemic. Measles transmission country began seeing shocking resurgence between 2012-2013 major outbreaks entered Swansea, Wales, saw 200 people ill, dozens requiring hospital care, direct predictable consequence, generation children. Parents persuaded refuse, delay MMR vaccine decade earlier, ghost return. Old hunting grounds, fear virus followed, respect national borders. Wakefield deaths, discredited ideas amplified, nascent power, internet global export. Stripped medical license, UK 2010 paper formally retracted, Lancet, utter fraud. Did not matter, United States welcomed charlatan, persecuted hero found. Receptive audience, celebrities, wellness gurus, message spread, phones, blogs. Explosive force, social media. Consequences, written public health records. Town 2014 perfect symbol, regression occurred, ironic places, Disneyland. Happiest place, Earth became epicenter, multi-state measles outbreak, single. Infectious tourist, likely country, measles, common mingled crowds containing. Critical number in vaccinated individuals, one spark virus spread, California. 6 states infecting 27 people. United States officially declared measles. Eliminated year to 1000 landmark achievement, now here again spreading theme. Part estimate. Quickly Victorian done story took darker specific turn 2017. Minnesota Wakefield allies specifically targeted states, large Somali American. Immigrant community held meetings, spread pamphlets, stoked fears. Community children, uniquely susceptible vaccine injury, prayed group already. Facing challenges, language barriers, navigating complex healthcare system. Exploiting legitimate concerns, high rates, autism community campaign. Disinformation, brutally effective of vaccination rates, Somali American. Toddlers, Minnesota plummeted over 90%, just 40% result. State's worst measles outbreak decade, 75 people, mostly unvaccinated, Somali. American children contracted disease, war 20 ended, hospital calculated. Laboratory perfect demonstration, real-world impact, Wakefield light target. Community misinformation, destroy confidence, vaccination watch disease. Roaring catastrophic illustration, new reality, occurred half world away, small. Pacific Island nations, Samoa 2019 ultimate tragic end, game Wakefield fraud. Year prior, terrible medical accident, infants died, nurses incorrectly mixed. Our vaccine, muscle relaxant, sterile water, shattered public trust, anti-vaccine. Groups, Australia, New Zealand, United States, flooded islands, social media. Propaganda, blaming vaccine feeding flames, fear government temporarily. Suspended MMR program, time reinstated, damaged, done population terrified. Vaccination coverage collapsed, catastrophic 31% October 2019. Measles arrived, population virtually herd immunity, virus moved, terrifying speed. Efficiency, firestorm, bone dry forest, government declared state emergency. Schools closed, public gatherings banned, desperate attempt rush vaccination. Unprotected officials asked families, unvaccinated members hang red cloth red. Flag outside homes, mobile medical teams find islands, dotted small crimson. Signals vulnerability late, many hospitals, overwhelmed, sick, dying children. Final toll heartbreaking, 500 cases country, just 200,000 people, 83 deaths, 72. Children under age 5, 83 deaths, completely preventable disease, tragedy born. Directly like concocted 20 years earlier, London office money, return conquered. Disease complete, merciless, ever find ourselves 21st century fighting war. Thought already won battle, measles, unfolds to different deep. Interconnected fronts, unfinished war, constant quiet struggle, both biological. Virus, viral idea, one front fight familiar, one continuation, great public health. Crusade, 20th century logistical war, fought world's most remote, underserved. Communities battle cold chain, immense operational challenge, keeping millions. Vaccine doses, precise school temperature, travel, plane, jeep, motorbike, foot reach. Child, dusty village, sub-Saharan Africa makeshift, clinic, refugee camp. Bangladesh Heroic Grinding Work Organizations World Health Organization. UNICEF Gavi Vaccine Alliance heirs John Enders Maurice Hillman fighting. Virus home turf places healthcare infrastructure fragile political instability. Constant threat 2019 year. Similar tragedy. Still 140,000 measles deaths globally. Vast majority children developing world. Threat fraudulent paper. 1998 simple. Brutal lack access life. Saving shut war resources political while pushing back. Immense friction poverty conflict. Deliver small vile hope second front stranger. Insidious ways difficult fight battle. Waged clinics online war misinformation. Fought social media. A feeds private messaging groups comment sections. YouTube videos. Enemy rubella virus architecture. Modern internet ecosystem. Seems precision engineered spread fear. Mistrust algorithms recommend new soul. Pair shoes guide worried parent rabbit hole anti-vaccine propaganda. Frightening anecdotes. Slickly produced videos regardless truthfulness often. Engaging readily amplified dense, sober report centers disease control. Battlefield. Andrew Wakefield deaths. A long debunked retracted continues thrive. Mutating evolving share. Repost struck medical register career mainstream. Science Rue and digital world achieved immortality. Digital ward difficult data trust. Wakefield fraud deliberate tech sabotage foundation public health trust patients. Doctors citizens scientific institutions movement spawn thrive nurturing. Suspicion frames public health officials corporate shills doctors ignorant puns. Entire scientific consensus, vast conspiracy rebuilding trust slow painstaking. Process requires doctors, longer empathetic conversations hesitant parents. Requires scientists better communicators, step lap public square requires. Become critical consumers information, learn distinguish credible source. Compelling falsehood complete history measles ancient physicians first. Described modern day code as right algorithm spread. Lies holds entire story. Vaccination scene world, shield world disease, unavoidable lethal rite passage. Scene breathtaking triumph creation testament, human ingenuity persistence saved. Continues saving hundreds millions. Lives, scene happens falter allow fear eclipse. Reason forget lessons past resurgence measles wealthy nations long forgotten. Profound, humbling lesson teaches complacency dangerous side effect success. Vaccine works well makes disease disappear forget fear disease, absence fear. Create space begin fearing vaccine warm easels over never permanent state. Vigilance virus patient, always waiting reservoir and vaccinated looking crack. Collective defenses moment doubt, decline trust story measles, stark reminder. Victory science permanent monuments, stone fragile gardens constantly. Tended defended syringes refrigeration education. Empathy clear, communication. Importantly memory remembered archangels devastating cough small graves. Measles forgotten ever allow ready remind.